Hello and welcome. Now let us dive deeper into the language and read about some more important concepts. Okay, so if you remember, we have already touched on the concept of functions and why it is needed. But now let's study about them in details. Okay, so there are three types of function in Python. First are built-in functions. That is, they're added by default. So as you start writing a Python script, these are inbuilt. For example, print or input. Okay, all these are built-in functions. Whenever you run the IDLE and you start typing, these are inbuilt. You don't need to import them. Okay. The other functions are the functions which are defined in modules. Okay, and we need to import these functions in order to use them. So what do I mean by them? Okay, for example, I need to use mathematical functions, and for that I need to import the module, and let's see how we do the import. Okay, so we use the import keyword and we write the name of the module we want to import. Okay, let's see what does that do. Okay, to give you an example, now I can use cost function. Okay, I'm gonna read about it in detail, but just to give you a simple example as for moving ahead, you can do this and it will return me the value of cost. Okay, so and the third are user defined modules. Okay, so the modules which are defined by us and are made according to our needs. For example, I need to make a software for a car company, so I will make a different modules for it. For example, one might be for keeping track of all the sales, another might be for keeping track of uh, all the other details. Okay, so I can create different modules and I can import them the same way I'm importing these modules. Okay, so let's read about functions in detail a bit. So functions are defined by def keyword, as we have already learned about it. But always remember, I have also touched upon this before, but I'm just repeating myself. Always remember that you need to define functions before we use them. Okay, so because the Python program compiles from top to bottom. Okay, so the functions can either return a value or not return anything. Functions that don't return anything are called void functions. Okay, void means empty. So the functions which do not return anything are called void functions. Now you can return multiple values in Python, which is really unique to Python. So, and these values are returned in a tuple. Let's see what I mean by that. Okay, so let's return multiple values, and let's make it return 40. 40, 30. Okay. Let's call our move function and see what happens. See, it returns 40 and 30. What happens if I do this? See, this is same as that. Okay, so you can return multiple values. You can either club it in a tuple, or if you don't do it, Python is going to do it for you. Okay, I hope that is clear. Okay, so now moving on to parameters. As we have already learned, parameters are something you pass to the function, and Python supports three type of parameters. Okay, so the first one is positional arguments. So these are basically which are passed using positions. Let's multiply these because the name is small and I'm just gonna apply and return the value. Okay, so I'm going to return val into table. Sorry, into val3. Okay, that's what I'm going to return. Let's run it and call it. 120. Now in this case it doesn't really matter uh, in what sequence I pass these values, but in some functions it does matter. Okay, so for that we're not going to use positional argument. Actually, I had to stop the recording because the pigeons outside my house were making a lot of noise. Uh, but luckily the microphone did not pick it up, so I didn't have to re-record that part, and I'm just going to continue from here. Okay, so we have read about positional arguments. Okay, now we need to learn about this a small concept called default arguments. Okay, so let me give you an example of default arguments. Let's make a program to calculate the amount after a certain period of time in a bank. Okay, so I'm gonna name this banking. Okay, and we're gonna have three variables: time and rate. Okay, and we're just gonna return simple interest. Okay, so simple interest is simply principal multiplied by time multiplied by rate. Okay, and then we're gonna return it. Okay, now in our main function, I mean the main body of the program, I'm gonna call this. So let me call it in the shell instead. Be better. So here let's call banking, and I'm gonna pass say 5,000 for 2 years at 5% interest rate. See, so the interest is 500. Okay, we can also use multiple return statements to get the principal too along with the SI. So we can just make a variable temp which just calculates the amount after the interest is added to the this, and we can simply pass two arguments. Okay, this is how we use concepts in programming. Okay, we learn something and then we use it somewhere else. So I'm gonna call it, so I'm gonna call this 5,000 2 years at 0.05 interest rate. See, this is the amount he'll be getting after 2 years, and this is the interest that he got, right? So, but sometimes what happens that is the interest rate is mostly same for most people. Okay, so we don't want to pass this argument every time we have to call a function, but we want to call this argument only when there is an exception, only when there is the interest rate is different than 5%. Okay, so what we can do is we can take 5% as our default argument. Okay, like the value of our default argument, and now what we can do is if we call a function the same way we called it before, okay, so say 5,002, and here we can pass say a different interest rate, say 0.08. Okay, see, we get a different value. But what if it's a regular customer whose interest rate is 0.5%? I don't have to every time pass the value. I can just say this and it'll calculate based on this default argument. So now one thing you need to remember about default arguments is that you always have to have them at the end. So for example, you cannot have this rate variable before time. Okay, so this is invalid. You cannot do this. Okay, this will throw you an error. I hope this is clear. But if I want to have two default arguments, I can have them side by side. For example, default time is 5. Now this is perfectly fine. Okay, I hope you get the concept of default arguments. Okay, now we're going to learn about an important concept called scope. Okay, it's a really important concept in programming, and no matter which programming language you study, you're going to come across this concept. Okay, so this is really important. Pay attention to it. Okay, so the variables declared in the main body of the program have global scope. Okay, what does global scope means? As the name suggests, it means that they can be accessed anywhere in the program. Okay, no matter where you are accessing them, they'll be available everywhere. So what is main? What do I mean by main body? So let's say, for example, there is this variable g. Okay, its value is 10. Now it doesn't matter if I have a random function. Okay, I can still use this variable g. Okay, I need to call the function, not see. So this is the global variable, but how is it different from the other variables? So let's learn about something called local scope. Okay, so the variables and functions declared inside a function body are said to have local scope. Okay, that means that they can only be used in the function itself. Okay, they can only be used in the function in which they are declared and not outside of it. Let's see an example. Now I can get the value of g here. I can also get the value of g here if I want. See, it gives me no error. But what if I have a variable with a local scope, for example r, okay, and its value is 20. Now see what happens when I try to access r here. It straight away throws me an error that r is not defined. Why? Because r can only be accessed inside this random fun function. Okay, so let's see what happens when I try to print r here. Sorry, we need to call. Okay, we're gonna call this function and see what happens. See, now there is no error. Why? Because we're only using the variable in its scope. So now we need to learn about this thing that is lifetime of a variable. The lifetime of a variable, that is the time for which they stay in the memory, is the duration of the entire program. Okay, so the global variable stays for the entirety of the program. However, the local variable is only accessible during the execution of that particular function. And it makes sense. Why would you want to waste the resources keeping this R forever in the memory when it is not being used? Okay. So the lifetime of global variable is for the entire program. However, the lifetime of the local variable is only for during that function execution. Okay, I hope that is clear for you. So let's learn about this basic rules, that is how Python resolves scopes. Okay, how does Python know which variable to use? For example, what if I have a variable called g in here, and this is perfectly fine, we can have it. Let's see what happens when I run it. Okay. How? This is gonna throw me an error because I removed the R. So see, it gives me the value 20 and not the 10, right? But here this print statement returns the value 10. That means this, when this is accessed here, the value which is being accessed is from the global variable. But when the g variable is being accessed, it is used from the local scope. Okay, so let's see how this resolution process works. Okay, so first the Python program is going to search for the variable in the local environment. For example, here it searched for the g in the local environment and it found it. So it used the value. If that doesn't happen, like in the previous case when there was no g here, it's going to search for it in the enclosing environment. What do I mean by that? Say for example, this random function was inside another body, okay, inside another function or anything. So it's going to try to look for the variable in that function, okay? And if it still could not find it, it's going to find it in the global environment, okay? So what do I mean by that? It's going to look for the variables which are of global scope. If it still does not find that variable, it's going to check for built-in environment. Okay, so what is built-in environment? Remember how we use those functions, the cos, sine, all those little functions. So it's going to look for them in the built-in scope. Okay. So now in every particular scenario, that is whenever you're creating an application using Python, you'll need to import modules. Okay. So let's see what modules are. So modules are basically other Python files which contain functions and constants which we can import to use in our program whenever required. What does that mean? Say you're building an application which does not need any sort of advanced mathematical functions. Okay, for example, you're building a basic application which just prints hello, I'm there. Okay, or anything. It would be really foolish and wastage of resources to import all the libraries which are not being needed. Okay, so when we import a library which is needed, it's called importing. Okay, so let's see how we import a module. We use syntax something like, okay, so this is the syntax we use to import a module. Let's see. Say I want to import math. Okay, let's see what happens. Now I get access to all the math functionalities. What does that mean? Uh, let's say I want the value of cos. It says cos is not defined. And why is that happening? Let's see. How I need to access cos is using this. Okay. And now another way of importing module is when you can do this from math import cos. So here we can access a certain module out of this entire a certain function out of this entire math module. For example, I only need cos in my application. I don't need other functions which are available, so I can use this syntax. Okay, let's see the difference here. So earlier, remember, I had to call it like this, and calling it directly gave me an error. Now I can call it directly. See, because I imported using this. So this is a little caveat you need to remember. Okay, so if you want to, what if I want to import cos and sine too? What am I going to do? I'm going to write it again like from import sine. Of course you can do it, but it's too much. What you can do is you can just put comma and you can import it. Let's see. Okay. See how this gives me an error. That means the entire math module is not imported. Only cos and sine functions are imported. So it gives a really, like, if you are paying attention, you can find out what's happening in this case is it's importing that cos and sine function and it's making it part of our main program. Okay, that's why we can call them directly without having to call the module. Okay, so there is a little difference in how from import works and how import works. So just keep it in your mind. You don't have to actually understand how it's working in the background. Okay. But what if I want to import every module and I want it to be part of it? What I can do is I can simply write star. So now the star is going to import everything that is in this. So it's going to import cos. Sorry. It's going to import cos. It's going to import sec. Like, it's going to import every. I think it's called something else. But let's say tan. It's going to import tan and everything. Okay. So let's do something cool, and this is the last thing we're gonna do. So with this, our basic programming course comes to an end. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you how to open a web page, okay, and how to parse its data, and you will realize how beautiful Python is. Okay. So first we're gonna need some libraries, and the library I'm gonna use it URL library. Okay. And how do we import it? I'm not gonna require the entire library. I'm just gonna require the request function of it. Okay. The same way I can. These are the libraries. And you might think that this is going to take a lot of effort, but that is the beauty of the Python. It's literally going to take no time. So in the URL library, in the request class, we have not studied class yet because this is a basic course. I'm using URL open function. And what do I need to pass here? I need to pass an argument. Which argument? A positional argument. And what does it take? It takes the URL of the website. Okay. So you need to pass the entire URL. Say I want to pass google.com. Okay. That is it. I can literally call. See, that is how easy it is to connect and get. Okay, it's throwing me some error. Oh, because I'm not connected to the internet. Okay, I'll fix my internet and then we'll run it. Okay, I fixed my internet and I'm gonna run it again. Oh, I typed open row. I need to type open new. Okay, now let's run it. URL is not defined. Oh, because I'm using the variable web URL. So I need to pass web URL dot get URL. Okay. See, it works. It opened google.com on my browser. So what's gonna happen now? What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna parse, like get some data from here. Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna use some libraries of web URL. This URL lib. So let's get the HTML data. Okay. So I'm gonna use this variable and I'm gonna type read, and it's simply gonna read the HTML data. Okay. So what happened? Nothing happened. Why? Because it read the HTML data and it saved it in the HTML variable, but I nowhere printed it. Let's see what if I try to print it. Did it really get that? Sorry. Did it really get the data? Let's see. I'm gonna print HTML and see. All the HTML is here. You can see. Okay, so this was your entire Python series. If you liked it, do like the video, subscribe to the channel, write to me if you want. I'll be always ready to help you, and I would really love your feedback on this. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. And do tell me what other lectures do you need? Do you want me to make an advanced series of this Python course where I teach you about classes and all the advanced stuff in Python? Do you want that? And if there is any other language you want to learn about, just let me know.